Okay, today we're very lucky to be joined by Rob Douglas, who has an exceptional carnivore success story. And I really look forward to hearing about your whole journey, Rob. So, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So, Rob, do you want to kick off by introducing yourself and giving us a bit of a background on how and why you came to the carnivore diet?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Rob Douglas. I grew up in Illinois. I lived in Michigan for about 11 years. Then I moved to North Dakota, where I currently reside. Um, when I was a child, I was always sick with just so many different ailments. I developed uh, walking much later in life, probably closer to almost close to when I was 4 years old is when I started walking. A lot of different developmental type issues. And then there was lots of different pains. I ended up having to see doctors because I was hyper flexible, and probably because I didn't build the stability muscles um, from not being able to walk early on. And so I that kind of caused me a lot of trouble. And then as I was growing, the pains just seemed out of normal range, to the point where I was almost disabled. There were days where I just couldn't even really walk or anything. Later on, probably around 12, I developed really bad cystic acne that just never went away. Later on, after that, my skin actually ended up developing this red type rash. It almost kind of looks sunburn. And it became hypersensitive. And so I couldn't actually even wear clothes because it hurt so bad. And doctors just never really knew why. Um, I ended up being on a whole bunch of medications for all sorts of different things, and I think probably a lot with diet and the combination of medicines, I ended up developing IBS. Um, when I was at the hospital, I was dealing with some pretty intense intestinal spasms. Couldn't control my bowels. And I was at the hospital, and the doctor told me that was when I got diagnosed with IBS. And he said probably in a few years I might end up having to wear a bag.
Hmm.
It was pretty bad. At this point, I was extremely depressed. I was living essentially my childhood in pain. So many times there were just days where I couldn't even wear a shirt because my skin hurt so bad. And then the doctor wanted to give me more medication. At this point, I was already on so many pills. Um, and a lot of these pills, they made me so numb that I didn't even really feel feelings anymore. It just kind of nulled uh my thoughts, and uh really just even put me in a deeper set of depression. And after he wanted to give me more pills for the inflammation and muscle spasms that I was having, at that point, I was done. I didn't really care anymore. And I said, you know what? Thank you, but no, thank you. At that point, that was when I decided that conventional medicine had no answers for me. And another thing too, what I was kind of dealing with, I was going to the dermatologist weekly, and I was getting about 50 needle injections of a combination of steroids and something for pain. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was all over my back, my chest, my face, my neck. Um, so yeah, it was pretty miserable. And after just going to the hospital and the doctor telling me that, He later told me, he's like, yeah, you need to start eating a low fiber diet. And I think that kind of sparked the question in me that kind of started a little bit of a path, because I always thought, well, I thought high fiber diet was important, for intestinal health. And but he's like, yeah, with this much inflammation, you need to be on a low fiber diet. So I was like, all right, well, I didn't quite understand how to do that. At this point, I was probably 20 years old. And then one day I got introduced to a guy, and he was a part of a company that was network marketing, but was like a health company with superfood products. And he had a skincare product that he wanted to show me. So he had samples of it, and put it on. And within about a half hour, that redness started going away. And I could actually like touch my face without a lot of sensitivity. So I was like, well, I tried all these things that the dermatologist wanted to try, but never really worked. And then this worked, so I was sold. I joined the company. I started working with naturopaths, um, and learning a lot about nutrition. And then that created a huge passion for me. So I went to college and I studied science and alternative medicine. That's what I got my degree in. Um, I ended up doing everything that uh, was taught in nutrition classes that I had taken, holistic medicine, herbology. I had so much questions and hoping that I could find the answers, but I was following the guidelines that was taught. Now, I ended up actually becoming vegetarian for about a little over a year. I was juicing vegetables and fruits a lot, got a really nice juicer. And I lost quite a bit of weight and probably quite a bit of inflammation. My IBS actually ended up getting better. Um, the redness in my skin finally all just kind of went away, but I still dealt with cystic acne. But I ended up looking in the mirror one day and I was just skin and bones. I was like, something is very wrong here. I was not energized. I would sleep just like 15 hours a day. Um,
Mm.
and my hair was started getting really thin. I just was not doing well. And then one day I started incorporating meat in my diet, more like lean meats, chicken, fish. But instantly I just felt better. But it was always very small portions because that's what they taught in school. You eat small portions of meat, lots of veggies. And so that's what I just kept doing. Eventually, when I thought I was getting healthier, what I realized I was doing was I got rid of all the processed foods out of my diet. And so there's kind of a sequence of getting poisons out of your diet, and in a sense that is kind of an elimination diet. So you're getting rid of a lot of bad stuff, but you're still eating bad stuff. It's just the other stuff was worse. And so I ended up developing arthritis in my knees and my hips in
Mm.
my late 20s. The inflammation in my body ended up getting so bad that I ended up actually walking with a cane for a couple of years. And eventually I got to the point where I couldn't even bend over to tie my shoes. I couldn't get my socks on. I was just in so much pain. Finally, struggling with that for a couple of years, I actually heard Jordan Peterson talking about his daughter Michaela with arthritis.
Mm.
And I thought, well, this is something to look into. Before I had actually tried keto to lose some weight. I had gained a lot of weight once I started getting arthritis because I just wasn't moving around a lot. I wasn't exercising anymore, and I was eating quite a bit of carbs. So I tried keto, but the only thing I really knew about keto was it was a weight loss hack. Tried it for a little over a month. It probably close to 2 months. It did not work at all for me. I think I know why. I was trying to make everything super delicious, so I kept doing keto hacks, keto dessert, keto bread, trying to make everything like how my diet normally is, but in a keto way. All this did was trigger more addiction to wanting more. Same thing when it came with the plants on a ketogenic diet. Everybody always said you could eat as many plants as you want. That wasn't helping me. Um, so I stopped. I failed at that, and I thought, well, carnivore, this is a lot more strict. Maybe I can, you know, develop a little bit of self-discipline with this and it'll work. I tried it for about 2 weeks and I went through keto flu and I failed. I dropped out. I couldn't handle it. And later on, I had to like mentally get there in my head. I was like, all right, fine. You know what? I'm going to do it because when I jumped into it before, I wasn't really prepared. I had a lot of concerns, a lot of questions, as sure everybody does when talking about a very elimination diet. Like, where am I going to get all these nutrients from? It was contradicting everything I'd learned in school and learning about nutrition. So I had to really look at this in a new way. And once I started doing that, I think the first book I got was Paul Saladino, and that kind of really opened up a lot. Then I ended up getting more and more books. I think my second book was Dr. Ken Berry, Lies My Doctor Told Me. And it just now I have like this whole bookshelf of like so many books that just the information was it was like they didn't want you to know about it. It was like they put it all in a dark room and kept the light on everything else. And so I felt a lot more comfortable with this and I realized I had to get past the keto flu. And so I went back on carnivore again. Got the second time wasn't so bad after that first 2 weeks. But after the 2 weeks, we noticed that I wasn't snoring anymore. After a month, I was actually able to get a lot more mobility within my body. Around 2 months, I noticed that my arthritis just was it was very minimal. The inflammation in my back, my shoulder had all but gone away. 3 months into it, I felt better than I had. I can't even remember when. I was just at 3 months, I was a whole new person with a whole new life. It was like, wow, this was the answer the whole time. And so that really dug into me going even deeper into that information, what would you say, rabbit hole? And next thing I knew, it was just I'm still learning. I consider after studying nutrition for like 16 years, I thought, what is there more to learn? Like I'm just taking with all these guidelines and everything else, and then suddenly it was I'm a student all over again. I'm like an adventurous going into the unknown.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what led me into the carnivore diet. I mean, it was a total game changer.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing, Rob. Well, look, I'm really sorry that you had to go through everything you've been through. And it's not like everybody has the sort of severe childhood and teenage sickness that you had, but it is really common. It's becoming more and more common. And it's a horrible thing for anyone to have to go through. And this whole unknown of searching for answers, trying things and not finding a solution, trusting mainstream medicine, trusting the dogma around nutrition that's out there, and then not getting anywhere. I can imagine it would have been so frustrating. All the while you're thinking, I just want to live a normal life. I just want to be healthy. So, I'm sorry that you had to go through all of that. It must have been terrible. One thing that I wanted to ask during your story was what did you used to eat as a kid? And what was some of the kind of early nutrition that you had? when you were starting to get these symptoms, like not being able to wear a shirt because your skin rash was so bad?
So my diet was a fairly it was a pretty heavy processed American diet. Uh, Lots of box foods, lots of canned foods. We
Like pizzas and lasagnas that were frozen, or like what?
Yeah, stuff, yeah, the frozen foods like pizzas, pastas, TV dinner, microwavable TV dinners, lots of that, lots of ramen noodles.
Yeah.
A lot of the really cheap stuff. Eating bags of chips all the time, drinking plenty of soda.
Hmm.
That was a huge there wasn't a lot of money, and there wasn't a lot of options for me at that time. As a kid, you're kind of stuck with what you're given.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I mean, look, that's kind of a shocking diet, right? And it's how most of America eats and most of the Western world eats, and devoid of nutrients and high in toxins and super processed. It's a recipe for disaster. Um, at the same time, it sort of makes sense that when you switch to this whole foods vegetarian diet, when you started learning about health and nutrition, well, I say learning, you're learning the wrong stuff essentially, and you're learning information that has been captured and perpetuated by essentially corporate greed, either people who are trying to misinform deliberately to sell you things, or more likely, people who have been sort of taught a lie along the way and just have no idea. Because the mainstream dogma around nutrition is just largely wrong, and it takes somebody to hit rock bottom, which is exactly what you did, for you to have to go and search for answers. And unfortunately, hearing about a carnivore diet and hearing about only eating meat, animal products, and eggs is considered wacky these days, when really nothing could be more normal, and nothing could be more effective. That's really how people have always eaten. That's always been the priority for humans. You go back tens of thousands of years, you're trying to get those animal products. It's only when we've been subjugated as peasants or slaves, or in really dire circumstances, that it's all right, I have to try and get some nutrition from eating all these plants and veggies. We've always craved
Yeah,
and prioritized animal foods.
yeah, absolutely. Um, One of the things, the gentleman that actually helped me get into that network marketing company, he taught me a lot about his knowledge in nutrition, but he also kind of stemmed into it was the first time I heard of Kellogg's and all the terrible things that he did. And it was the first time I had actually heard of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And now this was like almost 20 years ago now. And after reading some of these books, then I got kind of the Seventh-day Adventist Church actually came up again. And a couple of names had popped up. Linda Fetke, I believe her name was.
Belinda. Yep.
Uh, yeah, yeah. And then all this information just kind of started spilling out the more I kept looking into it. I had been talking about Kellogg's for so long, because I was just like, we need to just not support these cereals.
Yeah.
And but I didn't really realize how deep that actually went and how far back that actually went. That kind of structured how we see nutrition today. I mean, that was a huge influence when it came to pushing vegetarian diets, high sugar diets, along with the articles that came out in, what was it, 2016 about the sugar companies. Um, Yeah, that was just a huge dive into just kind of like how corrupt our nutritional guidelines are. And then you start understanding how and why the universities teach it. Even so, I know that it's taught in conventional medicine, but it's also taught in holistic medicine. Um, I I remember, and it was really fascinating because even before I got into college, I was reading the blood type diet books. Are you familiar with those?
I've heard of them, yeah.
What's his name? Peter Diadamo is the author of the blood type diet. And that was when I started learning about anti-nutrients, and uh, his research was more or less about lectins. So I was learning all about lectins. And when I was in college, we would have a lot of class discussions, and I would bring up things like lectins. And then we're taught, well, lectins for the most part get cooked off, and then they die in our the acid of our stomach before they even get into our intestinal tract. So it's kind of it doesn't really matter, the lectins in food. And so I thought, well, that's kind of it doesn't really make sense based off of the uh the 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 research that this author had done along with his father, talking about the damaging effects of lectins. I mean, and how we even know our blood type is because of lectins and how they kind of combine with our sugar molecules, at least to my understanding. So lectins kind of play a, a role in our body, whether, and probably, as far as I can tell, in a very damaging way. But then it was always dismissed. I would bring up concerns about certain toxins. I didn't they never taught us the term anti-nutrient. I just learned a couple of different things and I was like, all right, I want to discuss this, but then it was always just brushed off. And it was like, well, the pros outweigh the cons. And so I just kind of took that face forth. It's like even in the nutrition class, we talked about human evolution. And that meat was the big component that spiked our evolution. And it was all we ate for millions of years. And with that, we became stronger. Our bodies, our digestive tract had changed. Our brains grew. We became stronger. And then at the end of their conclusion, talking about all of that, their conclusion was, so we believe that we should eat plants. I was like, I'm not coming up with that same conclusion.
No, it doesn't make
You
sense
know,
either.
right, and it was always the same. Well, our bow length is the same as an herbivore's, and our jaw lines swing from side to side, and it was all that same arguments, but it still, um, when you look at herbivores and carnivores, um, and the way they digest and process foods, it's very, very different. And I kind of get upset now when somebody tries to compare me to a gorilla. I'm like, I'm not a gorilla. My whole diaphragm is very different.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Rob, let's talk about how you're doing now and what your diet and nutrition looks like now.
yeah, so I'm doing absolutely great. I mean, I never thought a few years ago that I would be jumping off the bed of my truck with ease. And I'm working out again. It feels great. I with the lack of inflammation markers in the body now, I no longer get sore after working out.
Awesome.
My diet, it's very, very simple. Mo Primarily red meat and eggs, mostly beef and lamb. Tonight I just had a chicken. I generally don't eat chicken. I kind of find that I more crave red meat. Like when I start thinking about food, I crave that red meat. So I probably had chicken now 2 times this whole year. But that's it. That and lots of butter. Um, and all I drink is water, and then I have my cup of coffee in the morning. And I'm throwing around. trying to talk myself into even just weaning myself off of coffee, and that would
Well,
be
I
the
can
last thing.
I can help you with that. I'd like to be the one that gives you the little shove off the cliff, and then you never go back to the coffee. I know
Yeah,
that
do it.
it took me a lot of persuading to get off the coffee, and I quit about 2.5 years ago. But Dr. Chafee was very persistent, and he was explaining that the anti-nutrients and the plant toxins inside the coffee bean are very potent, and having them every single day is going to do cumulative damage. Not to mention, having caffeine all the time, because caffeine has a long half life. So you're always kind of jacked up. Your cortisol's always up, and that has a big ripple effect across your whole body and your whole health. Some of the benefits that I've experienced are deeper sleep. So I actually sleep less now that I've quit coffee. My hunger signals are much more clear. I actually know when I'm hungry. Caffeine in coffee suppresses your hunger. So that's why you can have like a long black in the morning and you might not need to eat till the early afternoon. But that's not a natural way of being. And we need to give our body the energy it needs and the fuel it needs. So you're much better off just listening to when you're actually hungry and eating then. Anxiety levels come way down. You just feel much more calm, less panicked. Body soreness, caffeine is a massive one. If I have a coffee now, which I don't, I'd feel sort of instant back pain and I'd start to be sore after a workout. So there are so many benefits to quitting coffee. And I know coffee is a wonderful ritual. You can still have the ritual. You can still have a mug of hot water, boiling hot water, which I had this morning. It actually tastes great. Until you've tried it, you wouldn't believe that. You can mix butter into it. You can mix an egg yolk into it. You can have bone broth. You can still have a warm, soothing drink. But quitting the coffee, trust me, it makes a world of difference. And I think, Rob, you'll definitely, considering how, because you are sensitive and you've had a damaged gut in the past. So something like quitting the coffee, I think, will give you a real boost.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with everything you just said. Um, it's like I kept throwing around, well, maybe I should just go back to the Salisbury diet where he recommended
Mm.
hot water,
Mm.
and that was it. You want a hot beverage? He's like hot water was the cure for in the 1800s.
Yeah.
I like the idea of bone broth. I actually just ordered a cow, and so definitely going to be making a lot of homemade bone broth.
Wow. Nice work. Um,
Yeah.
all right, Rob, I want to ask you a final question. What advice can you give to other people who are going through what you've been through? And I'll just list some of the symptoms that we've spoken about so far. Like you were a sick child, you were slow to develop, you had terrible cystic acne, you had a skin rash that was so bad you couldn't wear a shirt. Um, you've had IBS, you've been jacked up on medication, so you just felt totally numb, as well as arthritis, joint pain, stiffness. What advice would you give to other people who are going through this? They've tried everything and they're sort of thinking about carnivore, but they still think it's a bit wacky.
It's really tough because if me right now was talking to 18-year-old me, 18-year-old me would just be like, yeah, screw off. You don't know what you're talking about. That doesn't make sense at all. You have to be ready for the information. And that's really hard because a lot of people just, it's only when they're ready. And sometimes when they're ready, they've already done so much damage. And it takes a lot of time to heal. The body was designed to heal itself. And we just need to give it the proper tools to do so. And we need to stop poisoning it. And so I think the best advice is to always keep an open mind to any information that's given to you. Even right now, I'm still looking at endless research and studies, not just in carnivore, but in so many other areas. And I think it's important to realize an ancestral diet and how and why these medicines became stable foods. We would use medicine or herbs as medicine, and it was because we found that these plants can have an effect, whether it be antiviral, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, whatever it was, and we could tap into that and use it, but it was always used medicinally. We never ate it as a stable diet. And then somewhere along the way, we we took these herbs and the supplement market really took off with them. So it was something that was supposed to be used medicinally, ended up being something that's like, well, you should take this daily because it's medicinal. So like inflammation, for example, people take turmeric for inflammation. It said that turmeric will help with arthritis inflammation. Well, turmeric is one of the most heavily herbs in oxalates. So what you're really doing is you're damaging the body so much, putting more oxalates into your diet, and you're putting turmeric on your food, you're taking turmeric supplements. Um, and so it's all profit. And it's really damaging on the wallet too. They're very expensive. And so I don't think we should take it as a daily diet. I think if we went back to seeing plants as we used to as medicinal and kept on a high meat diet as we kind of developed ourselves in history for the last millions of years. Um, I think the best advice I can give is to say, let's be open-minded and listen to information and let's look to the past. Let's find that information. And if you're not ready for it, we're always here to answer your questions. And sometimes people aren't ready for it. And it's not until when they do get ready for it that we need to be accepting and welcoming to everyone who does come to us and need us. That's just really the best advice I can give people is listen, everything else failed. Why not just try this?
Well, well said. All right, Rob, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story. I hope this inspires other people who are suffering to give the carnivore diet a try. Uh, Trust themselves, trust their intuition, do their own research, and I hope they can get the results that you've achieved. So, Rob Douglas, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure.